Hello. Sorry. Facebook was giving me the runaround. So I am coming in live from Zoom instead because I couldn't get it to connect with Facebook, which is okay. So, okay. So happy to be here, and let me make sure I've got this muted. Okay. So, yeah, really want to talk about how to regulate your nervous system. Without spending a penny, doing this through your own body. And I really wanted to quick say, like, there are lots of tools to help regulate your nervous system, and there's lots of information, and I am not disregarding any of that. um, so there are brain retraining programs, there are nervous system programs. All of those can be helpful and assist you in the process. So by no means are saying those things are not helpful, but just wanted to share ways that you can begin to do this for yourself. So, um, just wanted to, okay, give me a second. Computer's really giving me a runaround today. So, okay. Um, so I kind of want to break down what I want to talk about. So a lot of what Heisey talked about with the nervous system, or with healing, we'll talk about that first. Is a lot of the what they call top-down approaches. I don't really like using like these certain labels for things, but like the mind approach, like focusing everything on the mind, kind of neglecting the body, and so I want to talk about both parts of that. Like, we want to use our mind effectively and our body, and not neglecting one or the other, or becoming really reductionist and like everything has to do with the mind or everything with the body, when really it's both of them working in concert together. So I am wearing all this really warm clothes because I actually just jumped in the pool. So it is like 70 degrees here in North Carolina. Um, the water was 52 degrees. If you aren't used to water temps, that's actually very, very, very cold. So my body's very cold. And there's a reason that I'm bringing that up, is because it is cold water swimming was one thing that taught me a great deal about body responses and how that changes our brain, and that it isn't just about our thoughts to our body, it's also our body to our thoughts. So, anyways, I'm going to speak on that a little bit later. I just want to share my hair is wet. I was very, very warm today when I got home a little bit ago. Decided to jump into the pool, and I am freezing, which is fine. My body will heat up on its own. But I've got a hat on because my hair is wet. Got this big scarf on. I've got a sweater on. None of this I would be wearing today because of how warm it actually is. So it's December 30th. It's winter here, but it's North Carolina, so it's actually we don't have bad winters. Um, so one of the key things, and that I want to talk about, is that when our nervous system is really, really like in a hyper aroused state, and it's really keyed up, this influences our emotional state like very, very significantly. So keep in mind that like not all of your thoughts and emotions and stuff are coming from quote unquote you. And when you're in those states, like your emotions can be heightened, and maybe you cry easier, or just you feel things like stronger. So that's how the nervous system, being in that state, can influence that. And it's not just about using your words to change that, because actually the state of being that you're in, and your body like in a hyper arousal state. So sorry, I'm just kind of looking at some of the notes I wanted to take. There's a lot of things I wrote, so probably be like an hour long. And then I'm gonna talk about really, really specifically like some of the things that you can do. But I want to talk about this. So the nervous system is like one part of us, and like we want to like put the nervous system over into like this separate little box. Like, we're gonna like regulate our nervous system, or we're gonna do this thing over here. And our nervous system isn't like this like really super separate thing. Like we hear about like our vagal tone and the polyvagal theory. Like if you've done a lot of research about the nervous system, um, but you don't have to make it such like a separate thing. Like your nervous system is you in a sense. It is like how you are responding and relating and reacting to life. And it is so it is like moving with you and a part of you all the time. So that I think is can be a shift of like realizing that it's not like this thing over here. It is very much a part of your way of processing life. And our body, which it's not just the nervous system, but our whole entire body, like its main goal is survival. And so it will take cues from our environment, but also cues from us as like what is safe and what is survival. So that's a huge thing. So so let's talk a little bit about like with some of the mind things. So um a lot of the things that I hear and I see is or people are saying like changing your thoughts and like redirecting and uh like changing those fear thoughts and um like there's a lot of techniques for it, and all those things can be really really powerful and really really helpful. But there's also the converse of that is that when your body just has a lot of fear to begin with, that actually processing that fear, a lot of that fear and getting some of that moving through the body itself will change the patterns of your thoughts as well. So I believe in the synergy of both of those things together, not one or the other, but both. So I would say that like processing your fear and actually facing those fears and like actually dealing with the like actual fear in your body or like the energy, the sensations of fear and dealing with that part of it is like sweeping the kitchen floor, like clearing out some of that. And then dealing with the thought portion of it is like not tracking in more dirt in the kitchen floor, like keeping it clean. And you want to, obviously, if you want to keep your kitchen floor clean, want to be doing both of those things. And so I do find it really, really frustrating in anything really, in any method to get really reductionist into just focusing on one part of the equation. So one and a key thing that and the different Facebook groups that I'm in and whatnot, that it seems that is sometimes missing is actually more of the body, like the actual processing of the body. Because people will be spending a lot of time in like this redirection of thoughts. Or it's like they have so much overwhelming fear and anxiety that there are so many thoughts that are like pinging through the brain that it's actually very, very, very overwhelming and very, very, very exhausting to try to change all those thoughts. I have been there. I know it is, it can be a full-time job and you might not feel a lot of difference for like a long period of time. And so that's why I'm saying that is just one part of the equation. If a person has a lot of fear, that will tend to make our thoughts like go like this. And so yeah, there's that two-pronged approach. So I'm going to talk a little bit about like, before I talk, I'm not going to wait till the very end to talk about some of the techniques. I'll talk about them here shortly, but I'll talk about some things first. Like right now, if you're listening, if you just take notice of how you're breathing, just notice how you're breathing for a second. And then I want you to observe, did your breathing change? When you started to observe it, did it change like at all? Because most of the time it will. Like we'll start breathing a little bit differently the minute that we start paying attention to our breath. It's actually really, really hard to observe your breathing pattern as it is without changing it. The same thing is if we bring attention to how are you sitting? Like, are your shoulders slumped forward? Are they back? How are you sitting? Are you sitting? Are your feet touching the floor? How are your like sit bones touching the chair? Or if you're standing, just noticing, or not saying they're going to say it. Hey, how are you sitting right now? it's interesting that like we will start to shift and move just through the pure power of noticing. And the reason that I want to bring that to your attention is because when we talk a little bit later about when we begin to pay attention to our body and our body signals, um, things can begin to change, even ones that we can't like feel, like our breath or our posture can begin to change inside just by the power of observation, just by noticing. And I'm trying to think of exactly how to say this. In what at first seems very, very subtle, but can be very, 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 very impactful over time. And so when we think about like the nervous system, I love to like bring up children. And so I'll talk about children, and then like for people who aren't around children very much, we'll talk about that. But like if you have had the experience of being around children, like if there's like a group of people sitting around and a child falls on the floor, and if the people in the room or even just one person in the room goes, you can see that can actually make the child start to cry, even if you can see on their face they maybe weren't going to cry. Versus if a child fall, like is running through the living room or something and they fall, and the mother, the child, or the aunt, the uncle, or whoever is like, "Oh, you're all right. You're all right." And sometimes they're like really close to crying or whining, and they'll respond differently. So children are a good example to see, because like they take their cues from us, and our nervous system also takes its cues from us. And when we react like to the sensations that are happening in our body and to every single emotion that's happening to our body, we are essentially that parent that is going, and we are creating a hyper aroused state in our own body. And our body's taking those cues from us, because while our body also takes in cues on its own, like it takes in like the temperature and stuff through our skin, and it takes in all of these other cues and adjusts accordingly. It also takes in from us because as we were created, our creator knew that the world was going to be changing, and so that we needed to be able to look around and see what was dangerous or not dangerous. And so it does take in those cues and adapts accordingly. So a huge part, I mean, like probably like boiling it down to like the very, very basic concept is, it's like our nervous system is really about how we react to stimulus. And I would say drawing it really, really, really close, like when you start with regulating your nervous system, is really, really, really in a very small way, is how you're reacting to yourself, to your own emotions, to your own sensations, to your own symptoms, to your own body, is where you start at, like very in the center of the center of the center, and then move outward from there. So if you're someone who's not really around children, consider like this example. And this is also a difference between like the body and the mind approach. Let's consider like you have a partner or a boss or someone in your life, and they like every day, like they get mad and like bang on things, and sorry, I don't know if you can see that, and they're like throwing things at the wall, whatever, but they're always like, and you get, it makes you nervous and scared, and they speak in a very loud, angry voice, and they yell, but they always say, "I'm never gonna hurt you. You're okay. You're safe. I'm not gonna hurt you." But then like 10 minutes later, they throw a plate at the wall, or they yell at you and say, "Shut up," and don't say that, and you shouldn't do that, and whatever. But they keep telling you at the same time, every time when they see how scared you are, "Well, I'm not going to hurt you, but you're safe." Ask yourself, like, how safe do you actually feel inside? Like when you walk into that house or into that workplace or wherever you're imagining the scenario playing out, do you actually have like a strong sense of safety, or are you going to be like a little bit walking on eggshells? Are those words so powerful that they're going to override the stimulus that's right in front of you? Are the words of this person saying, you're safe, I'm not going to hurt you, um, going to create a sense of safety? So it's just something to think about for yourself. And the reason I bring this up and bring it right close to your body is when um, we try to tell our body, you're safe, you're safe, you're safe, because that is like a part of nervous system regulation. It's not a bad thing to do. But when we tell our body, you're safe, you're safe, you're safe, like that can induce a sense of calm at times. But then when we turn around, and the minute that like a certain emotion happens or a sensation in the body happens or fear arises, and we like fear it, or like we run away in escapism, or we clench up, whatever, we're actually sending signals that we're not safe. So we are not demonstrating safety, even though we're speaking safety. Does that make sense? And so this is an error. I think I see some people are like, why is my nervous system not coming down? I'm always saying, I'm safe, and like saying this affirmation. Well, there's a difference between just saying I'm safe or someone telling you're safe, and there's a difference between actually demonstrating safety in the body. And demonstrating safety in the body is actually how you're reacting and responding to what's happening in your body. So, going with that is that we have been taught, like we haven't really, I feel like, I mean, I was never really taught like an effective way to deal with emotions. I feel like it's not something that's really, really taught in our societies. For anybody who was taught, I think that is wonderful. Good for you. You are miles ahead of everybody else if you got taught in childhood how to like effectively process and deal with your emotions. But for the most part, I feel like we've come from like generations of people not knowing how to deal with emotions, who then taught us not how to deal with emotions, who then were like, don't feel that, don't cry so much, you're overthinking, you're being too emotional, you're this, you're that, which then we internalized and took in to like push down, repress, reject, fear what was happening, and then can create dysregulation. I believe dysregulation can start as simple as being told you're too emotional, you're overreacting, you're overthinking, and hearing these messages and internalizing it when we are like probably younger, and not ever really learning to respond to those sensations, just like with calm and peace, and let them process through. Instead, we're like, oh, I'm not supposed to feel this, or I'm too emotional, so all these emotions are wrong, and we like push them down, and then which actually in the end intensifies them because they keep trying to like push the lid open and like come out, and they're not allowed to do so. So then when they finally get some glimmer of being able to come out, like really, really intense, like 10 times more intense than they would have been had we just like been able to feel them in the beginning, had we known to do that. So um so then I'll talk a little bit more specifically about like how do you create that sense of safety, because your like I said, I do believe it starts with going to the very, very center of how you're responding to your own body, to your own sensations, to your own emotions and sensations, etc. So, and emotions are one of the hard ones, or not the hard ones, one of the tough ones, because we have a lot of moral judgments and ideas about emotions. But when you've practiced, like what I'm going to teach you in a second about emotions, and you can boil down emotions, say like you don't think you should be angry, you can boil anger down to just like this heavy feeling in my heart. It's like, how does a heavy feeling in my heart like really have a moral judgment to it? Does that make sense? But when we are in our mind about our emotions, and then we take that anger and then we go and do something bad to this person, well, then it's not a good thing, you know? Or we take this resentment, like I'm going to go slash my girlfriend's tires because she did this thing to me. Yeah, that isn't good. And that's most people's experiences with emotions, and why they think that we need to repress our emotions, because that's the experience they've had. But when you actually process them and meet them and not reject them, but actually let them process, those are not the things that are happening. So let's talk specifically about like more like some of the body approaches real quick. Like, and there's three, I would say three, I mean, there's probably many, but like different ways, but three that I would say that I've used and know of like, how we actually can like demonstrate safety to the body, not just tell the body's safe, not just say affirmations of safety, etc., but like actually like, um, create an environment and like demonstrate safety. And that would be like actually sensing in to what we're sensing. And when just sensing into it, like just to feel it, like just to allow the energy to be there. That's the part of the mind work. Like there is a certain space you want to be in your mind. Like I'm just going to sense into it, just going to feel it, just going to allow it to be there. So that's like the mind part. And then the body part is like closing your eyes. Let's just say if you have anger, and just sensing like where that is, like anger might be like heaviness in the heart, but like dropping, not thinking about it, but like dropping your attention down from the mind into those sensations. And that's as simple as it gets. It's not like that much more complex than that. Like sometimes you can get stuck in certain ways. And what is interesting about it is when you're actually doing this, that it never feels quite what you think it's going to be. We'll build it up like, if we have a really scary emotion, we'll build it up to be like this big, big thing. Like if I felt my loneliness, I would fall apart. If I got in touch with my grief over this thing or my regret from not doing this thing, it would just collapse my whole world. That's almost never quite what we think it's going to be when we actually have the courage to drop into it. And I say courage because when you first do this, it's actually can be really scary. And if it sounds scary, that is some measure of the degree of disconnect we are from being in our bodies, actually. And what's really, really beautiful about it is it's actually really peaceful. Because when we like spend a ton of time in our mind about like this anger and this person and this thing, I mean, we can spend weeks, months, years like in all of this mental drama. We can create limiting beliefs about it that later we need to undo. Like we can create all this stuff around something versus just dropping in, sensing what we sense can actually allow the energy to process and then move through. And it's actually really, really peaceful. It's like one of the most peaceful processing things I have ever experienced in my entire life. And I've tried like a bajillion. But, and it doesn't have to be like all day or anything. It can be just like a few seconds at a time, breathe, and you might still be aware that there's still some of that emotion there. And then like when you're ready to like drop your attention down, sense into it, you may feel that emotion move. Then all of a sudden you might feel some nervousness in your stomach, and then you might feel some like angst in your head. And and that's fine. They often will move. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they do. It's not about having like some certain opinion about what's supposed to happen, but just like letting the energy be there. And what's so interesting about it is that, or what I perceive this after having done this for very many years now, is when we don't actually like allow ourselves to feel what we feel, and there's like that block to it, we don't actually get like part of the information and the nuanced message that's included in that. We think we know what it is, but we don't. And so many times that I've done this, that like 5 days later, I'll have this insight about like the situation or the thing that I never had before doing it. And it's just been, it's just happened enough times that I know it's not a coincidence or a one-off thing. It's like, it seems like by sitting with it and allowing energy to process, it's like connecting with our brain, like connecting with it and sending some sort of messages on the back end that we're not aware of. And then it like can release and go through and change everything. And then when we sit with what is and we face it and we meet it and we allow it to come in, it also can change our interactions with other people. Like if we know we have this really scary conversation to have with someone, we can process a lot of the fear around it before we ever step into that conversation, which will actually change the way that we speak about it and will actually change the whole entire conversation. Before I go into the next one, but I want to talk about something that I've noticed, like that seemed like there's some human resistance to doing this. I've talked about this with people before, and for some reason seems to be some maybe natural human resistance. I'm not really sure if it's it's universal or not, but like and I do think it's because we are so much in this time in our minds, and we feel safe there, and it can be scary. And just remember that like feeling anger or like grief or like these emotions, like they aren't going to hurt you. And you can always remind yourself, like, I'm in this chair and I'm just going to feel this for 20 seconds or 30 seconds or something at a time. Like, if it's something really intense, like trauma or something, I would highly recommend getting support with doing that. But like for just your basic emotions, it's like our body's designed to be able to work with that. So I wanted to take this chocolate bar just to illustrate like the difference. So people sometimes will say like, well, I've been feeling this for years and years and years and years. And one thing that I want to say about that is there is a massive difference between feeling something and like dropping in and feeling something. And the difference is so much that like if I took a bite out of this bar, I would taste it, right? Like, of course I would taste it. You can't deny that I've tasted it, but there is a dramatic difference. That would be the whole, I've already felt this pain. I've already felt this emotion for 2 months and months and months or years. But if you actually take like, say this is an emotion and I actually like pick it, excuse me, and taste all the different flavors, like in all the nuance, like all the undertones of the chocolate, like that is the difference that I'm talking about. Is the difference is between just like eating something and then pausing, letting it melt on your tongue and tasting all the different nuances of flavor. And I use chocolate. I actually don't really love chocolate. But I used this because chocolate has like those different flavors. Like I can taste a little bit of like, I have a hard time putting some of these flavors in words, but like a more of a depth of the flavor, maybe a little bit of a caramel in that flavor. And I tasted something a little bit fake. So do you kind of see a little bit of the difference? So that's the difference between I've been feeling all this pain and anger for years versus I'm going to drop in and like really feel all the flavors and the sensations. So that's one. That is one method of doing this. So the second one is because some people have some difficulty actually feeling like their sensations, and I think it takes a little bit of practice in cultivating that. It's pretty much everybody has felt emotions in their body to some degree, but like nervousness in their stomach, like butterflies in the stomach or things like that. But like, I think it can take a little bit of cultivating a practice to actually feel it more regularly. Another thing you can do is if say a person has, I'm going to just keep using anger as an example, but like anger or despair or whatever it is, but they're not really feeling anything in their body. Like, I don't really like feeling something in my stomach or my head or my anything. You can actually use the body in this way. You can actually like tense up the body as though you were in anger or fear, and like even your facial expression, and you can sense into that. That sometimes sort of like helps bring that up to the surface. These are more the body approaches. And then you can also just speak the emotion if you're aware of exactly what it is. You could just speak, I feel so much shame. And just breathe into that. Even if you're not really aware of where that shame is, you can breathe into the heart area, which is the emotional center. That's always going to be a fine place. or just like speaking in general into that space of shame. That does help these emotions process. It helps you begin to build a different reaction to them. Now, a lot of times we will have judgments, opinions, and feelings about our feelings. And so going there first, actually. So it's like, oh, I'm so angry about whatever, but I should just be grateful because da 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 da. Well, you'd want to start there, like, oh, I feel like I should just be grateful. Process that feeling first before you're even going to be able to get to the core anger that you feel. And sometimes you'll have a few layers of things like, oh, well, I should just be grateful about it. And then once you process that, maybe something comes up and it's like, well, I'm angry, but now I think that I don't, I shouldn't be angry because this reason, and then go there. And then eventually you'll be able to get to like that core part of it. It sounds complex, but when you're actually doing it, it's really not that complex. It's just like a little sequence and of working through that. So that's some of the body stuff. And we use our mind also like to help shift our reactions to what we are experiencing. So that's like we can, when fear comes up or anger comes up, or emotions, we can be like, I'm willing to feel this. I'm willing to be with this. I'm willing to experience it. So we can just, even just saying that can help and like can begin to prime our body and our mind to be willing to allow these things in. When things keep arising and we are always escaping, just ask yourself, like, what signal am I giving my body when I go into escapism? Every single time I go into uncertainty and then I go into my reaction is in fear, like what signal, like what kind of a signal am I giving my body? Don't reject the fear, but just ask yourself that question. And then that can help you to like start to lean into like, okay, well, if I really want to demonstrate safety, to start shifting that a little bit. So, and then I want to, a little bit about the body too. And to speak about this a little bit is that everything is not about thoughts in the way that our thoughts influence how we feel and how we feel influence our thoughts. And I wanted to bring up some of this because it seems like this gets left out sometimes, but like how being tired will affect our mood dramatically, or being hungry, like you can be really, really hungry and be snappy and whatever. And it's not thought driven snappiness, it's hunger driven. And there's biological reasons like your blood sugar is low, etc. But, or I should say physiological reasons. And then after you eat, all of a sudden you feel in a great mood. So don't be so misled to think that every single time that you're in a bad mood or something, it's because your thinking has been off. It can be very much your state. And it's like, even like when we're in love, like we have lots of loving thoughts. And it's really, 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 really easy to think all of these loving thoughts. But what about the times when we're not feeling like the so in love feelings, right? Those thoughts don't just come as readily. So our state also, like when we are flooded with like love, we think a lot more love thoughts. When we're flooded with fear, we think a lot more fear thoughts. Just something to keep in mind that like, when we focus so exclusively that everything has to do with our thoughts, that can mentally exhaust us. Another thing that I think is really key with your nervous system is actually staying a little bit out of your mind, balancing the time you spend in your mind and your body. It's interesting to note that people will say this, and I've said it too, but we're so busy nowadays. Everyone's so busy. Da, 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 da. But one time I was talking to my sisters, who are stay-at-home moms, by the way, which is a very demanding, exhausting, crazy job. And I commend stay-at-home moms or moms of all kinds anywhere all the time. Like, wow, because I'm not a mom yet. But anyways, but then it's like, if we actually pause and think about it, we, as a majority of us, are not actually busier than like our great grandmothers or however many generations we have to go back, when their work was from sun up until sundown. And for the men too, like would work from sun up until sundown. And there was not leisure time like we have. And there wasn't time for vacations. And there wasn't time to sit on the couch and read a book very often. And like, we'll use the women, for example, like they had to churn the butter and they didn't have dishwashers. They didn't have washing machines and dryers, and they had to do all the stuff by hand. They had to make all the cooking took way longer because everything was by hand. And they made all their food from scratch, and they had to make their clothes by hand. They had to mend everything. Like they actually were busier than we are. And their work days were longer and harder. But what is interesting to note is that we feel so much busier is because we are so much in our mind. It is the mind busy that is like the mental fatigue that is killing us. Like almost everything we do now is like in the mind. Like working now, working used to be very like hands-on stuff. Like I said, like churning butter and washing clothes and doing stuff. Now, most of that is like automated, or we buy butter from the store. Like we're not working with our hands very much, which is more of a body-centered practice, but we are here. Like we're on the computer and we're consulting, or we're thinking, we're managing, we have schedules, all of that like mind-centered work. We are, when we're on social media, we're in the mind. When we're reading, consuming information, we're in the mind. Listening to this video is in the mind. The majority of the time we're actually spending in our mind, and we're spending a lot less time in the body. And so we feel like we are so busy when you actually break down time spent doing activities. We actually aren't physically busier, if that makes sense. And I know for like some of my friends would be like, oh, summertime feels so busy, like there's so much stuff going on, da 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 da. And it's like when we start thinking like, oh, I have this thing going on tomorrow and this thing going the next day. But like when you slow down and like take day by day and just spend your time in the moment, like, oh, we're going to the lake today, we're going to spend time in the sunshine, and you're not thinking ahead, it actually can and really prevent a lot of that mental fatigue. And the reason I'm bringing this up is just to illustrate that, to keep in mind when you're doing like things for your nervous system and your health and your body, is that spending way too much time in one or the other, it isn't really beneficial. And we're in a society right now where everything is in the mind. Like pretty much all of our activities are in the mind, and we're very little time spent not in that like thinking, intellectual mind work. That's just the way that it's happened. Where many years ago, they spent a lot less time in the mind. They were more doing physical hands-on work. But it has been shown that spending too much not having enough mental rest can actually contribute to depression, anxiety, and mental disorders as well. So keep that in mind, but also that being present in our bodies is a very good regulation tool for your nervous system, because your body can only ever be in the present moment. Like we have memories from the past and we can think in the future, but that's all the mind work. Your body is right here, right now. It's never can be anywhere but in the present moment. And so when you center yourself into even like sensing into what's going in the body, or anchoring some of your attention in the body, you are always bringing at least part of you into the present moment, which is, again, a very strong regulatory response for your body. Very calming, more in the present moment. Okay, so I'm going to look at some of the stuff that I wanted to make sure I didn't skip over. I want to share a little bit too about some of the body work. Because I'm kind of on this talking more about the body work, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the mind stuff too in a second. With a little bit more, and I'm probably talking more about that than the mind, just because I feel like a lot of the stuff that's out there right now is mind. And it kind of skips over some of the stuff. But the other day I was watching a video on Therapy in a Nutshell from YouTube. I really like that, her channel. I can't think of what her name is, but she's a therapist, and she makes some really great videos. She talked about how they've actually shown in some studies that yoga has been more powerful in treating PTSD than medication. I've seen similar like I don't know if you'd say studies or articles or that said things like that. But really with that mind body connection. Now, I know there's some people that don't practice yoga, um, and that's fine. But like, even like, it's not, doesn't have to be yoga, but like the practice of what yoga really does is you're doing a stretching routine, you're breathing, which is a body exercise or regulation exercise. It's bringing you into the present moment. And then the real, when I first learned yoga, which I don't practice yoga anymore either, but when I first like you learned it, before like the diet industry and fitness industry took over it and made it all about like burning calories and all this crazy stuff, I first learned it of like, you really sensed into what your muscles were doing. And it was like you stood in a certain way, and it was like, breathe into the muscles, breathe into the contraction, see if you can stretch a little bit further. And it was like, I felt like it was a very powerful practice. But then like later, as I kept watching yoga videos, it felt like it was a whole different thing. But I feel like, and there's probably some word for it. I don't know enough about yoga to know what all the different kinds are, but the kind that like actually brings you in to like sensing into the body, builds that mind body connection that I feel like is so missing in our regulation and in our health with chronic illness as well. And the reason too that I'm bringing a lot up about the body is that for so many people that have chronic illness, it was actually by a lot of times it was because we had a huge disconnect between paying attention to our bodies in the very first place, that at least in part led to getting chronically ill. Was like our body did give signals. A lot of times it's 2020 hindsight. Like we look back, like I was getting signals of like my body was starting to get tired. Like I was starting to get cues for rest. My body was giving me signs I was pushing myself too much. I was getting my stomach was starting to hurt from eating certain foods. We got these little signs and we ignored them. And I know that was definitely true for me. And I know it's been true for many, many people that I've talked to, is that we ignored them. Not that you want to go the other way and be a hypochondriac about it, like freak out about it, but you can be aware and you can let the body tell you what it needs and act appropriately. And that's like with that body connection. And that is really, really good for your health. And that's by being connected with what the signals that your body is telling you. And I'm going to share a really quick personal story. When I first was tested for gluten intolerance, so it was early in my chronic illness, and actually, I was a few years in, and I tested very highly gluten intolerant. Never had a biopsy to test for celiac, but anyways, now that I can eat gluten freely, pretty sure I don't have celiac. But anyways, I didn't eat gluten for a few months, didn't really feel that much different. I ate it one day, felt like I was gonna die. I mean, like my whole body just, and it was really interesting. This still surprises me to this day that there was this little bit of stomach like pain, and it wasn't really pain, but like discomfort or like feeling that I felt after eating that gluten that I realized had been with me for a long time. But I had become so used to it that I wasn't aware of it. And the reason that I'm saying that surprises me so much is because I've heard people say stories like that, and I'm just like, no, like that would never be me. Like I'm pretty aware of what's going on in my body, but like that did happen, and it still kind of surprises me. I don't know why, but it's just like really like I wasn't noticing it. But there can be a thing like when we ignore what's happening to our body, we're not using like the awareness and the connection with our body, that we can get so used to something that we no longer even know that like it's happening. And so the reason I'm saying this is like by paying attention and tuning in and actually paying attention to what's going into our body and sensing in actually leads us to greater health. And so I do see sometimes where people are like focusing more on it's always about your thoughts. It's not always about your thoughts. And your thoughts cannot tune you into your body and show you these things that your body gives you the signs of. And it doesn't always translate into thoughts. It's like you just feel you're starting to get headaches every day because of something. And until you actually start paying attention, you might not realize I get a headache every day And then you make a connection that, oh, it's on the days that I work at this other job when I'm not drinking water, so I'm dehydrated, right? Like it can be something as simple as that. Like, but when we don't pay attention is when it becomes a problem. And so what makes me nervous about some of the things I see is people are like, ignore your symptoms. And it's like, don't do that. Like, that that just seems a little bit backwards from where we're actually trying to head, like actually get you more tuned in so you actually know what your body needs, not to like try to ignore everything that's giving you. It seems like that's part of what got you there in the first place. But I want to say this real quick. Indifference in like the TMS model of healing, which my approach is a little bit different from TMS, has some of the same principles, but I would say it's a little bit different. Some people use indifference effectively with like pain, and indifference is actually different than ignoring. Indifference still like acknowledges that there's pain, but it's like choosing a new reaction to the pain, which is, I'm not going to react to it. I'm not going to hyper focus on it. I'm not going to go into fear about it. So that actually is a difference. It doesn't seem like it, but ignoring is the unhealthy way to go about it. And indifference can work and be healthy. And once a person has went through these other channels and actually realized that there's nothing wrong with their body, and that's more in the TMS like pain style approach. But and real quick too, another body thing that like just another example of like where our body holds things or like processes things that the thought alone approach is going to help is that I learned something really interesting years ago, that sometimes veterans, when they're like over in a war zone, and if a bomb happens, what happens with our bodies is that if there's a threat, like our body will naturally try to orient to and see where the threat is coming from as a part of our, I think, our safety survival response. And some veterans would like get a tick in their head, like this. And what one, I don't know what it was, doctors, therapists found was that some of these veterans had been in a war zone, had a bomb come, but they hadn't been able to, but they were trying to see where it was coming from, but before they had a chance, the explosion hit and they were blown, like knocked over or whatever, and end up in the hospital, etc. And their body was doing this like physical response, like trying to orient to where the bomb was. And it was through the body work of like letting that whole I can't remember exactly how they did it, but like some sort of somatic body work of like letting the whole head go through that whole process of orienting towards the threat that actually cleared that out. So just another thing to keep in mind, that like there are things that thoughts can't resolve. So let's see here. Another thing, like as I'm talking about the body stuff, is that I've had this question before. Some people are like, well, if you presence into your symptoms and into like what's going on, aren't you focusing on it? And isn't that going to lead to more problems? This is a really, really good question. And the answer is no, it's not. But that's not to emphasize, to elaborate more on that. Why isn't that going to happen? So the focusing part is more mind led, like thoughts led. And like, it's like, oh my goodness, I'm sick. And it's like creating all this mental story about it. When, say, if I had a headache right now and I just presenced the headache, that's not a mental story. It's just like dropping in, sensed into the pain. What that does is it actually allows those signals of pain to get to the brain. The brain then can register, oh, there's pain. The body/brain will work to resolve pain when it's brought to its gentle awareness, not in resistance, but it will work to resolve tension and pain. It might not happen that same day or in 30 seconds, but it will work towards resolution of that. And it allows actually those energies to release. Huge difference between someone focusing on something with their thoughts. That is where it can be where, oh, I keep focusing on it. And every day I wake up and I'm like, oh, I'm in pain and sickness and, oh, I'm sick. That is what focusing is. That is what can lead you down, can get you I don't want to say stuck, but like can get you into a pathway that you don't want to be in. But actually presencing your body is very, very nurturing and is very beneficial to your body and actually assist the body in seeing what is going on and getting the proper signals actually getting to your brain. Because when we resist things, though that information can't get through. It's like this person here is trying to talk to you and you like have your arms out and you're like not listening, not listening, not listening. You're not hearing what they're saying. You can't hear that they're telling you that your house is on fire. And so it's the same concept, is that like when we resist, like whether it's our emotions or our symptoms or our pain, we're like pushing against it, our body and brain aren't really getting the signals. They're focusing on resistance. They're putting all their energy into the resistance. Like there's going to be a fight coming on. We need to build up this army of resistance. They're not actually hearing what's behind the resistance. Does that make sense? Like what's actually going on behind it, what needs the attention. So something to keep in mind. It's not the same thing. It is not going to make your symptoms worse if you don't do it with a resistant mindset. And that's part of the mind work, is being like, let me presence this as a way to nurture my body. Let me presence this because I know this is good for me. Let me presence this because this is a way to get my body and brain to connect. Not let me presence this to get rid of something, because that's adding more tension. So yes, there is a little bit of a mindset there. Okay, and that second part was so then some of the mind work I wanted to talk about, because with regulation is like saying you're safe, like we talked about that a little bit, is it can, that like saying certain things like I'm safe can induce a sense of calm, but I do think without having that body piece, you only have one piece of the equation. But some other things like more for like your mind is I have found for myself, I was terribly much an overthinker for years and years and years and years, and I am thankfully not anymore. And I do think now that part of that was from my like anxious fearfulness also, that is no longer there. But I also took steps to come out of that. But what I have found over and over again is that in a directionless mind will just go pinging all over the place. And so giving your mind some direction, like it can be before bed, each night, which oftentimes can bleed into the next morning, or just taking a few seconds in the morning to give your mind some direction where you want to head in, can make just a dramatic difference than an untethered mind just hanging around thinking about whatever. And what do I mean by get it direction? Well, everyone probably does this in their own unique way. But I'll tell you what I used to do when I used to get to work at my old job is I would open up an empty Word document and I would type in like my intentions for the day. I would type in, and this would take like 3 minutes, which you could make it shorter. It didn't take very long, but it would set my whole day up. And I would type in like sometimes like what I wanted to accomplish. Every day was a little bit different. I'm more of a free form type person. I don't like to follow really, really rigid schedules. Some people might like that, want a specific formula, but like I would just go with what I felt with every single day. But like a lot of it was like my intentions, like let me give you some more specific, like and like things I want to do that day. Like I want to call these 3 clients. I want to work on my this or that, etc. Some of it was like I want to how I wanted to feel, even like giving that direction. It seems like I headed that my brain and body would head in that direction way more often than not. Like I want to feel confident and like everything is put together today, and I want to feel like things are going my way. It really felt like that would set the tone a lot of times. I would even put things that are more like for my overall picture. Like I want to feel like I'm gonna be one of the top people in my field, like things like that. And like I'm trying to remember because it's been over a year now, like just different things, like what would come to mind. And I feel like if you started a practice, you would continue to self-learn. And I think that's actually the most valuable learning that there is. But like of what things that like really can kind of set your whole like mindset and stuff going in the right direction. rather than, and just notice the difference between actually sort of setting those intentions versus the days when you don't, or the days before you did it, like how your mind just like, like all over the place. So that's part of it. And then like with the nervous system too, as a large part of it is like shifting our how we're going to react to things. And that's a little bit the mind work, like sometimes it's choosing, just as simple as choosing a new reaction. Now, sometimes it's not that simple because our body is like so instinctively reacting to things. But there are times when we're in such a place that we can actually have enough of a pause, like to be like, is that really the reaction that I want to choose? And actually choose to change it. And yes, I do recognize sometimes it's not that simple. But so for example, like you have a let's just use an emotion. You have anger come up and you have this instant reaction like, I should not be angry because whatever. And maybe you catch yourself and you're like, is that the reaction that I want to choose? Maybe I'm like, maybe it's actually okay that I have this anger and it's here to show me something. I'm going to choose that reaction. Like, let me just sit with this anger and see what it has to show me. Like that is a different reaction. Just observing something, just observing is really, really powerful. And it sounds so simple that it's not at all helpful. But like we had way in the beginning, say like, notice how you're breathing, notice how you're sitting. You will make little adjustments without even like trying. And that's the power of, that's the power of observation, is that you will make adjustments and like your body / mind will make adjustments in your behalf. And observation is a different reaction. So it can be the beginning of neuroplasticity, and the beginning of nervous system regulation can just be as simple as, I'm not going to try to change my reactions. I'm not going to try to do anything, but first observe them. And I call this like spending some time understanding yourself, or like learning and like sitting with. And so not only can it be really, really eye-opening to like be like, interesting, the only time I ever react to that is when I'm tired. It can actually make you feel really, really good sometimes, like when you have a realization like that, like, oh, I'm not as much of a brat as I think, or whatever, or I'm not as much of a this as I think. I really only react to that when I'm tired, or I really only think those types of thoughts when I'm depleted. Or you'll realize things that are really, really interesting. And then some things you might realize that are really make you uncomfortable about yourself too. But like, that's okay. Like, it's all good. Like, you learn so much about yourself. But even that power of just observing is a whole different reaction than what you were doing before, because our body instinctively reacts in ways that you're not even aware that you are. We tend to react against things that are uncomfortable, even if you're not aware that you're doing it. I'm pretty sure if you're human that you are, like, you're reacting against it. So consider just opening up to being aware. And if that sounds really, really overwhelming, try it for maybe 1 hour or 1 day, see how it feels. And then maybe like, okay, 2 days from now, I'm going to do it again. Like, don't make it this thing where like, I have to do it forever now, on ever and ever. Amen. Like, from now on, like, I'll just start slow. Test it, see how it feels, go from there. So I'm just about done here. So there's some stuff with like your mind. If you have trouble trying to catch all of your thoughts and change them, it also, yeah, I'm not really a big fan of that approach. I found that really, really exhausting. I definitely approach that differently, but maybe choosing one thought or two that are really, really powerful, or maybe one specific time, like an hour of the day. And sometimes it's hard to catch them in the moment, but like, I could go right now and be like, okay, let me think about my thoughts for the last hour and see what they were. And you could decide if like any of them, like, do it backwards at first, but until you can actually maybe catch them in real time, or even doing them backwards. I've done that before, can still be pretty effective. So those are just some ideas. So I hope that is helpful. I'm just going to real quick summarize that with nervous system regulation, it really comes down to how you're relating, responding, and reacting to life. Particularly start with how it is really within your own body, within your own sensations and your own symptoms. Start there. And you can begin to move outward from there. But that's what's going to like create the strongest sense of safety for your own body. But starting there, the very center of the core of it. And then you can move out to how you're relating to other people and how you're relating to life and how, you know what I'm saying? Like other things. But going in the flow with life changes things a lot and calms your system down. And I, real quick, this was something I did want to say I have that I didn't want to forget is another thing just to think about, just to give yourself like another thing to think about is if you just consider like, say it's a symptom or an emotion, and you knew you were going to have that symptom or emotion for 5 years. God came down and told you this, or an all-knowing source said, no matter what you do, you're going to have this for 5 years. Okay. I get that can be defeating, but just stick with me for a second. But like, let's just pretend that you knew that. Would you choose the reactions you've been choosing, like to fight it for 5 straight years? Or would you choose to try to find a way to be more peace about it? And consider that perspective, like when you are thinking about these reactions, because some people will be like, well, I can't like find peace about this because then it might not ever change, or then might not, whatever. Well, consider that it doesn't, that's never supposed to change for 5 years. Just give that perspective for a second. Would you still choose to fight it? Or would you try to find peace about it? There's not a right or wrong answer, but like sit and think about that. Like, and if you would choose to find peace about it, think about how you would do that. And if you would choose to fight it, ask yourself why. Like, why would you create that much additional suffering for yourself? And if there's a part of you that's like, I couldn't not fight it, I think there's something there for you to like examine and open yourself up to, and just pay attention to maybe a belief that you have that you're maybe not aware that you have. So anyways, I hope this is helpful. Let me know if you have questions, and I am going to sign off. So I will, I post in the group. I don't have like a set schedule, but if this is one of your first times being in the group, I do post videos in the group. We do have guest speakers coming in. I do have one. I missed her. Our schedules collided a little bit early. It's like 2 weeks ago. Probably in the next week or two, we're going to have another guest speaker. So excited about that. And I hope you guys have a good day. Happy New Year, right?